You're listening to Whoa! Potluck.
Hey, welcome back to Books and Boba, a book club and podcast featuring books by Asian and Asian American authors. My name is Marvin Yeh.
And I'm Rira Yu.
And welcome to the first Books and Boba episode of the new decade. Happy New Year to everybody. Happy 2020. Rira.
Yes?
How does the new year feel to you right now?
It feels, I don't know. I just feel like we're, Is it weird that I have a very pessimistic view of 2020, even though we just started the new decade?
I mean, I feel like it's pretty on brand for you. I mean, it's going to be a big year. That's going to dictate the next few years of our lives. So I think it's reasonable to feel a little apprehensive going into it. I choose to feel cautiously optimistic because it couldn't possibly get any worse.
Oh, you say that, but I can think of a few ways where it could get worse. But
I mean, we're here to discuss our December 2019 book club pick, which was a real feel-good story to end the year on.
I know.
So I guess we're just setting the mood for our discussion. You want to start us off with the book description?
Yes. So, Isma is free. After years of watching out for her younger siblings in the wake of their mother's death, she's accepted an invitation from a mentor in America that allows her to resume a dream long deferred. But she can't stop worrying about Anika, her beautiful, headstrong sister back in London, or their brother, Parvez, who's disappeared in pursuit of his own dream to prove himself to the dark legacy of the jihadist father he never knew. When Parvez surfaces half a globe away, Isma's worst fears are confirmed. Then handsome, charismatic Eamon enters their sisters' lives. Son of a powerful political figure, he has his own birthright to live up to, or defy. Is he to be a chance at love? The means of Parvez's salvation? Suddenly, two families' fates are inextricably, devastatingly intertwined. So Homefire was longlisted as a candidate for the 2017 Man Booker Prize, and it won the 2018 Women's Prize for Fiction. So a highly critically acclaimed book.
And a real feel-good story, too.
I told people in Goodreads that it was a modern adaptation of Antigone, which is a Greek tragedy, and it was probably going to be pretty dark.
See, I forgot what Antigone was about, and I didn't look it up before reading this book. But as I was reading it, I kept thinking in my head, oh yeah, it's a tragedy. It's been a while since we've read a truly tragic tale. I don't know if we read any true tragedies for this book club.
I guess so. I don't know.
Unless I'm forgetting. We've read a lot of books.
I mean, it was definitely a literary fiction novel.
Yeah.
This might be me being like a little bit I'm stereotyping here, but literary fiction, there's a lot of sad stuff. So when we read literary fiction novels, I always expect it to be a lot darker than what I usually read.
I mean, the thing with Greek tragedies is there is no, you can't go in expecting a happy ending or even a okay ending. I guess
with Greek tragedies, it's mostly about the themes, and the characters are pretty much vehicles to drive those themes, and it's supposed to be kind of like a platform where the playwright can just ask these very deep questions, philosophical questions to the audience and give them something to talk and debate about. And that's pretty much the main purpose of Greek tragedies. For me, who majored in dramatic writing and read a lot of plays and also almost minored in Renaissance art history, I read a lot of Greek, Roman epics and plays. So going into this book, I was like, okay, I think I know the main beats to this story. And I expected to not be too surprised, but thankfully, like, there were bits where I was surprised, even though it's like, oh, this is definitely gonna happen. Like the brother, first spoiler of the podcast, like, oh, the brother is definitely gonna die, because that's the whole thing with Antigone. She, for those of you who are not familiar with the Greek play, pretty much Antigone is the daughter of Oedipus, and Oedipus is pretty much her father / half brother, because what happens is that Oedipus kills his father, the king of Thebes, without knowing that he is his father, and he marries his mother without knowing. And Antigone takes place after the Oedipus play. So Oedipus has already gouged out his eyes and died, because this is a tragedy. And his sons, Polynices and God, I cannot pronounce the name, but Polynices and Eteocles, I'm not sure how to pronounce the name again, but they fight to gain control over the throne, and Polynices is deemed as a traitor to the state. So King Creon, the uncle, who takes over the throne pretty much, he says that Eteocles is a hero, so he will get a proper burial, whereas Polynices is a traitor, so he will not get any burial rights. And anyone who tries to give him burial rights will be condemned to death. And this is a big deal because I don't know if you guys know about anything about Greek culture, but they're really into the underworld stuff. Like, it is a real big deal if you don't bury your loved one. And Antigone, she pretty much breaks King Creon's law and goes to sprinkle dirt on her brother. And pretty much the play is about, like, state law versus moral law. What is allegiance? Is your allegiance to your family or your state? And what happens when your family member is the enemy of the state? Mm-hmm. So a lot of those themes are in Homefire, and a lot of the characters hew very, very closely to the original Greek characters. Anika is Antigone in this book. Ismay is very close to Ismene, the sister of Antigone, who refuses to go along with Antigone's plans. And even Aemon is very similar to the name Hymen, who is Antigone's fiance. Mm. So a lot of characters are very parallel to the Greek play.
Yeah.
But I liked what Kamila did with all of the characters. I thought all of the perspectives, since this book is split into 5 different POVs, I really liked how she structured it. I liked how each character got, like, their own voice, and I felt, like, really invested in like their journey. I think once it turned into Anika's point of view, that's when, like, my anxiety went up, and I was like, oh damn, like, things are gonna go down. And because Anika is so emotional and unpredictable, I was just like, I don't know what's gonna happen, even though I kind of know what's gonna happen. What about you, Marvin, since you are not familiar with the play?
Well, since I hadn't, read Antigone since, Greek mythology in high school, I wasn't as familiar with the beats. It did start to ring some bells after Parvez was killed in halfway through the story. But throughout it, I was kind of looking at it more from a fresh lens where I didn't have the beats of the Greek tragedy in my head, like looking for those cues. You know how sometimes when you're watching adaptations or reboots, right, you're looking for those familiar beats to satisfy those, neurons that like react to familiar things. So since I wasn't looking for those things, I think I was kind of taking things in one at a time, kind of trying to piece together the story. And as you read, you start to realize like this is all going to end badly. Mm-hmm. Because of those tensions between family, state, and even modern society. I thought it was really smart of the author to set this in like modern day UK, which is similar to a lot of Western democracies in the world these days, embroiled in this tension between nationalism and what's the opposite of nationalism? But like
individualism. I don't know.
Like let's say anti versus pro immigrant stances, right?
I thought it was really because like Marvin and I are Americans. I'm guessing that like you're not completely familiar with like British politics, and
I follow it.
All right.
A lot of what the Harmut, the father of the narrator of the last section, who is a member of parliament, his stance is like aligned with the anti-immigrant stance of like current Tory leadership in the UK, right?
This book came out in 2017, and if I remember correctly,
right after Brexit, right?
Yeah, right after Brexit, and it was also, I think it was in the summer of 2017 where there was a terrorist attack in the center of London. I think it was London Bridge, and after that, the terrorists, they like the Muslim community in England said, "Oh, we're not going to give them Islamic rights when they bury them. Like they don't deserve it. Like what they did is not in line with our faith, and it's like what they did was horrible, and they're pretty much like not Muslim in our eyes." And that's like very similar to what happens in this book with Parvez's body and how he is quote unquote repatriated to be buried in Pakistan because he is deemed as not British. And that's like a main theme in the book where it's like, what does it mean to be British? And how is that measured by? Is it measured by your assimilation, like your closeness to white society? Also, like the fact that the Pashas and the Lone families, they're both Muslim families, but they're very, very different on the spectrum of expressing their faith and what it means to identify as a Muslim in Britain.
Well, I mean, this story works on like there's several themes going on, several questions it's trying to ask. Like you mentioned, one of the most prominent ones is, what does it mean to be a second generation immigrant, right? What does it mean to be a member of a diaspora in another country? And I mean, in that aspect, it's very similar to a lot of immigrant stories that we read that are set in the United States as well. What does it mean to be, in this case, like British Asian in 2017, right?
Yeah. That was like, it's a very small thing, but I thought that was like interesting because here we say Asian American, and it's almost like Asian is the adjective and American is the noun, because it's like we're American, but our experiences are tinged with like Asian culture. But in England, it's British Asian, British Pakistani, and I thought that was like really interesting because it's like the complete opposite. And I don't know, I don't know if it's like hyphenated over there, but I don't know. It's just like a small thing that I noticed.
Really, I guess it's not really hyphenated here anymore neither.
Yeah, but it started off as like hyphenated.
I don't know. Maybe it's a grammar thing.
No way. I don't know. It's just like a small thing. And I really liked how the book started off with Isma's perspective, and especially like the first opening scene where she is being interrogated by pretty much TSA, and how I think it's in that scene, but she kind of like bitterly wonders why like when they mention terrorists on the news who are Muslim, they always say like British Muslim or British of Middle Eastern descent or British of Pakistani descent, and it's like, oh, like England will never own up to saying that the terrorist is one of their own, that they're just British terrorists.
Yeah, I mean, you see that in the States as well. You know, whenever there is like a tragedy that happens, everyone's holding their breath, like who is the perpetrator going to be? And if it's ever someone of color, you see that community of color immediately have to make a statement. I thought the author illustrated pretty well the guilt and the anxiety that people of color face whenever something like this happens and the perpetrator is someone from their community, and the repercussions that has on everyone in that community, right? Because individuals from like a marginalized community have to become representatives of that community, right? We see this in, when we talk about representation, like the opposite is true, right? If one person of color does a really bad thing, people think, oh, they're all like that, right? And that directly affects Isma's, trip to the United States, where she is held up for hours just because of who she is, right? And also because of who her father was, right?
Yeah.
And that question of, your loyalty to your motherland also like extends to the individual level, where it's like, how much are you the child of your parents, right? Do who your parents are dictate who you will become or who you are, right? Because that's how people saw Isma, Anika, and also Parvez, right? Which is like, oh, of course you're like this. Your dad was bad.
Yeah.
I mean, if you extend that further to just like the class themes of this book, right, where the lone family, Eamon's allowed to be kind of a screw up because he has that privilege. He has the family connections, whereas the Pasha family, and especially Isma, have this constant need to be perfect at all times so that people don't question her loyalties.
Yeah. Isma is definitely more of the camp of like, we need to be good immigrants. We need to we need to kind of apologize for whenever someone from our own community does something bad to make us look bad. And it comes from a place of fear. And I think it also comes from a very logical place, because with Anika, like, she's studying to be a law student, but at the same time, like, she kind of has this naivety and idealism of like what justice means, whereas like Isma, who is like much older than Anika, who pretty much is like a mother instead of like a sister, I think she's lived long enough to see the consequences of speaking up, and and also she was old enough to see like to learn about her father and how her father's like decisions impacted the entire family, and how it's just like a domino effect of like grief and stress and anxiety, and how it's just like passed down.
Yeah, but her more conservative views also affect what happens to Anika and Parvez, because by not telling them everything, not telling them about their father, not letting them learn about their family history, it sends her siblings down a path that ends in tragedy as well, right? And I think, all three siblings kind of represent a different way that people resist in cultures that, oppress minorities. Isma is the assimilationist, right? She wants to keep her head down, work hard, and work her way out of this situation that she's in. She believes that by playing by the rules, by following the rules, she'll, survive. Anika is more like the rebel, right? She's, but not to the point of extremism. She wants to change things from the inside, right? She thinks, okay, I'm not going to play by the rules. I'm going to get to a point where I can make the rules. And that's how we will institute change. And then Parvez represents someone who, because of all these forces that work against minority communities, gets pushed to extremism, right? Whether or not he actually wants to incite violence or hurt people, he's forced to do this because he's led to believe he has no choice. And he's led to believe that the only way to fight back, the only way to institute change is to do it violently.
Yeah. With Parvez, I thought that like his main reason for deciding to go to Syria was pretty much like it was pretty much like he felt like he was stuck behind, whereas everybody else was moving forward. Like Anika, who is this twin, like she's going to law school. Like Isma is going to America. That they're not living in the house that they grew up in anymore, and he's just kind of stuck at this like minimum wage paying job at the grocery store. And
well, not only that, he's also the artist of the family, whereas his sisters are literally going to become a doctor and a lawyer.
Yeah, very
right?
pragmatic. And also just like because he didn't really have a father figure in his life, like there is this, like he has like this desire to be a quote unquote manly man. Like that was like one of the main tactics that Farouk used to recruit Parvez, being like, oh, this is like what it means to be a man. And like your father, like he went into battle, he was brave. There's a lot of like, there's a lot of toxic masculinity there.
Yeah.
And like Farouk like badgering him, saying like, why are you listening to your sisters? They're women. And like, you let them like poison your mind and stuff like that. So
yeah, Parvez is raised like by strong women, and you see that his moral center is still pretty intact, even though he joins this radical terrorist cell, and he eventually realizes that like it's all bullshit. Right, all those tactics. He's still able to think for himself. Like he isn't totally indoctrinated. There's this really good scene in the middle of his section of the book where he comes to the realization that his father didn't really care about him.
Oh yeah,
right?
Because like he finds out that like the soldiers in that group, they were allowed to go back home for the winter every year, and he just like his dad just never came to visit them. So. That's how he ultimately knew that his father didn't care about them.
Yeah.
And he's not really upset about like learning that his dad was a bad dad and didn't want to see his family. He was more upset and disappointed by the fact that he turned out to be just like his father by abandoning his family without like really thinking of the consequences of what they were going to go through.
Yeah. And I thought a lot about the difference between Parvez and Eamon, where like Eamon coming from a more privileged family, like upper class, like family that has political power, he's allowed to kind of be a screw up his entire life, kind of just floating through and like getting job offers from his friends at like high paying marketing firms, and turn out okay. Whereas Parvez makes a mistake and wants to atone, but he's not allowed to because of who he is and who his family is, and because his family has no power.
Yeah. Well, since we brought up Eamon, I think, like, what did you think about his relationship with Isma and then his relationship with Anika? Like,
I mean,
for the people who did not know that this book was going to be a tragedy and did not know anything about Antigone, like, I bet they were just like, oh man, love triangle. What?
I thought it might have been too, because it took a while for Isma to actually come back into the picture. So you don't really get a confrontation. But I liked how it wasn't really a love triangle, right?
Yeah. Well, like with Isma and Eamon's relationship, I thought it was really interesting because Isma is so critical of Eamon's father, and like the entire time she knows that Eamon is the son of the home security official. Like she kind of like, I don't know how else to say it. Like she's very salty, and
Well, she's very like aloof around him, which he finds irresistible, I guess.
I guess. It's very, you get like a very, very crystal clear portrait of him when he asks Isma, like, oh, so is your hijab like a style thing or is it like a Muslim thing? And she makes a joke that was pretty funny where she's like, oh, only 2 people have asked me about like my head covering and they have asked me, is this a style thing or is this a chemo thing? And I just thought that part was funny. But yeah, like it just shows like how different their Muslim backgrounds are pretty much.
I mean, it's a good introduction to the central themes of the story, which is you can be from the same community, have 2 completely different attitudes about the same issues.
Well, the main reason why Isma is against Ayman's father, Karamat, is because when her father was arrested and on his way to Guantanamo, her family had asked, like, can you give us updates on where he is? Like if he is dead, can we do a funeral? And Karamat was just like, no, like he's a terrorist. Like, why should I even bother? And that's like that's like part of the main grudge that she has against that family.
Yeah, well, and also just what Karamat's done to that specific community in general, their specific neighborhood, because he used to be their MP. He used to represent their, I guess, I don't know what the British version of district is, probably district. I don't know. And Karamat is, your, I guess, I don't want to say stereotypical because I don't think they're all like this, but in fiction, a lot of them are like this. Like your sleazy politician, right? Where like he convinced the community to vote for him as like, let's put a Muslim man into parliament and I'll represent your interests. And then a terrorist attack happened and he had to disavow his Muslim identity. And he did that readily, right? Because they took a picture. There was a picture of him entering a mosque that created scandal. And he had to like distance himself from the Muslim community. And after they voted him out, he ran in a white district.
And won.
Yeah. Based on his, his anti-fundamental Islam beliefs, right? His anti-immigrant beliefs. And he kind of became that kind of candidate for them. And it was interesting that when Isma first met Ayman, she made a mental note, because it's in the narration, that it's Ayman spelled the Irish way, not the Pakistani way, to, make him sound more British. Because Ayman's also a mixed race. Like he's half white, half Pakistani. And he was raised in a way to fully assimilate, like to have nothing to do with their original cultures and community. Which leads to some interesting tensions in his section of the book when he starts to, really pursue this romance with Annika.
Yeah, like with Annika, she when she finds out that Isma told security about Parvez and how he went to go join ISIS. She's like, you betrayed us. Like, don't even try to like come see me. Like, you're not my sister anymore. And then like she embarks on this relationship with Ayman because she's like, I'm going to do whatever it takes to bring my brother home. Whereas with Isma, like she could have gone down that route, like knowing that like he's the son of Karamat and he could possibly bring her brother home, but she did not take that path. And Annika like calls her out on it later, being like, "Oh, you should have like, why are you criticizing me? This is what you should have done." And I thought that was like, I don't know. Did you agree with Isma's decision to tell security about Parvez?
I mean, I don't know what I would have done in that situation.
Yeah, it's a very difficult situation.
I don't like whether or not I agree with her, which I don't know whether or not I do. I understand where she's coming from, where she's been disappointed by like people like her father her entire life. So given the choice between her brother and her sister, she chose her sister. I mean, assigning blame to anybody is tough. I think the person who probably has the most blame in this entire story is Karamat, as the person in power who chose to do nothing with it or chose to actively antagonize with it. Whereas Yzma, sure, she had some power, but it's not at the level where she can actually affect anything. And so in that situation, like someone would probably use that power to protect what you have left than to fight something that you'll probably lose. And I don't even know if her reporting her brother did anything, because when Parvez was gunned down, they still went after her family. No matter what she did to kind of prove herself as a good, quote unquote, good Muslim, right? They still went after her family. And during the fallout after Parvez is killed and her sister's relationship with Ayman comes to light, Yzma kind of doubles down on her, like, keep your head down stance, right? We will say whatever they want us to say to protect ourselves from anything in the future. And that, again, like everything in this story leads up to the final chapter where everything just blows up. Like, literally.
I know that some people were like disappointed by the ending.
I mean, it's a tragedy.
Yeah, I mean, it's a tragedy, but I guess like a lot of the complaints that I've read on Goodreads and in other reviews is that it just like, they were like, oh, it just kind of came out of nowhere and it was so sudden. And I was like, I don't know. Like I felt like it was a pretty good ending. It was a very cinematic ending. And you know, it matches with, you know, the Greek tragedy. And,
because in the Greek tragedy, when the king decides, all right, I'm going to pardon the brother, it's too late, right? Antigone hangs herself, and the king's son kills himself because of his love, and so that's essentially what happened, right? The prince chose love over family, and
what did you think about like? I kind of have like mixed feelings about it, but like Annika like manipulating Eamon into like a relationship with her, and her pretty much saying like, oh yeah, like I wanted him to be at a state where he would do anything for me so that I can ask him to rescue my brother and not question it. And just like the question of like, oh, was it like actual love or was it just all pretense? And
I mean, it goes back to who has power, and not only who has power, but what options that power opens up. I mean, you see that illustrated later in the book where Eamon, as Harmat's son, has a way out from association with a family with terrorist ties, whereas Annika's family has no out. They become pariahs because of their association. And so in that situation, what other choice did she have? Like, her number one drive was to bring her brother home, because she had been talking with him over, I guess was it Skype?
It was Skype or WhatsApp or yeah.
And so she knew that he wanted to come home. He like regretted his decision. He admits that he made a mistake, and he's willing to face the consequences, but he wants to come home to his family. So to make that happen, like, I mean, there was no other option in her mind at that time.
In her mind, there were definitely options. She chose to do whatever it takes to seduce the politician's son. That's why I say I have very mixed feelings about it, because it's just like Annika's point of view is like, if you love someone, like it's unconditional love, you would do whatever it takes. Where it's with like Yzma's point of view, it's just like, if you have no power to change anything, because you know it's like it's Eamon. Like, what can he possibly do? He is like a trust fund dropout. So I don't know. Like I mean,
it's the same question, right? Do you agree with what she did? And like, it's hard to agree or disagree, because
I guess it's not so much about agreeing or disagreeing.
But you see where the thought came from, right? Because what other options? Like, the only other option is to just like not do anything, right? Like, it's like, would you do what Yzma did? Would you do what Annika did? And both options are equally bad.
it still hurts the family no matter what.
Yeah.
Yeah, because like with Annika's decision, it like affected the entire family, even her family in Pakistan, where they're like, oh, we have to, like, it's our responsibility to bury your terrorist brother, and now everybody is dragged into it, and now like all of the good work that we've built up to be like good citizens is now muck because of a rash decision that you made. And with Isma, it's just like, because you did nothing, because you decided to protect the family that you have, you abandoned your brother. So either side, there's not really a correct way to go about like resolving the issue on like how to protect your family, because either option is like terrible.
Yeah, and that conflict is also mirrored in the relationship between Eamon and his father. Both families are wrestling with loyalty to family, loyalty to love, and loyalty to the state, right? Like, and loyalty to what you feel is right.
Yeah, because even like at the end, like Karamat's wife Terry was like, do you see what you are doing? You're preventing a family from burying their own. Like, Parvez is dead. Like, there's no harm in like letting his family just grieve, and that a lot of people in the country agrees with this viewpoint. But he's like so like narrow-minded that he's just like, no, like.
Well, I mean, a big part of that is Karma. He has grand ambitions. He wants to become the first Pakistani Muslim prime minister of the United Kingdom. And so he's playing the game, right? The Game of Thrones or the House of Cards or whatever. And he somehow positioned himself to become Home Secretary, which is basically Homeland Security, right? For the UK, which is pretty big as a Pakistani Muslim. His position is what I guess in some way Isma wants to aspire to, which is someone who people like on paper can say that guy is British. That guy is British, like Britain first. And I mean, even his story, you see that that's never the case. Like, people are always going to be prejudiced against him because of his background, because of who he is. Like, people will always like find every small way to say, see, that guy's actually more Muslim than British.
Or that guy is more Muslim than like British, more British than Muslim. And like there's like both sides are criticizing him for different reasons. And
he's willing to like abandon his community, like his Muslim community, to appeal to his white constituents, because that's his path to power. And in his mind, he's justifying as that, don't you see, I'm making it better for everyone. If I become the representative of the Muslim community, people will accept us. And that's his whole, like, call it delusion or his aspirations, but that's why he does what he does.
I lost my shit when he like did that speech at the school, where he was just like, oh, like everybody, like pretty much what he was saying, like everybody should dress like British people, like everybody should conform. Don't dress to express your individualism, because that's like making people think that you're the other or whatever. And then it started trending on Twitter, and I'm just like, oh. Like,
and that single-minded pursuit of that power loses him his family. His son is mad at him for making his fiance suffer. His wife is mad at him for using their son for political gain. And he does. He leaks the relationship between Eamon and Annika to exonerate his son, but also to further cement his position as like a tough on terrorist home secretary, right?
Yeah, he also brings the question of like, oh, is citizenship a privilege, or is it like something that, like, his stance on it is like, it is a privilege to be a British citizenship. People should not have dual citizenships, and people should have to choose Britain first. And that citizenship shouldn't be like a thing that is automatically given to you because of where you were born. And yeah, it is very much an anti-immigrant stance.
he's your I could do it, why can't you? Like literally the model minority poster child of the story. And yeah, like his entire, like his perspective, I get why we ended on it because it's from that we get to the tragedy of the last chapter. But he's not a sympathetic character at all. I guess again, you get why he does it based on his drives, but you don't. It's hard to agree with it when you know the whole story. And I think that's why this book really works, because you see the situation from a lot of different perspectives. And I thought the most interesting thing that the story does is give you Parvez's perspective from before to after his indoctrination into the Islamic State.
Yeah.
Right? Whereas like from Isma's perspective, he is like someone who she lost. He has been corrupted and there's no getting him back. So it's better to forget about him. And then from Karma's perspective, he is like someone who's irredeemable. He made a mistake that you can't come back from. And it doesn't matter why he did it. Like he is now the enemy. Whereas from Parvez's experience, you see the reasons why, again, it's hard to agree with what he decides on, his decisions, but you see how he came to that point and you see that he does regret it, right? Like just because he made this decision doesn't mean his whole entire moral center is corrupted. And fundamentally, he's still a good kid who grew up around a lot of really strong women, who has like a strong idea of what right and wrong is, and wants to ask for forgiveness if that'll be given to him.
Yeah, I had to keep reminding myself, like, oh, like he's 19. And this is something that happens to so many young men who gets recruited to ISIS from different countries. And just like the naivety of it all with like Farouk showing him pictures and like him trying to like him saying like, oh, like your dad was like a great warrior. And then as soon as they get there, he's just like, oh, bye. Like,
yeah.
Like I have a wife, I have kids, I'm in the front lines. And he just like never sees Farouk again until like he tries to escape.
And he finds out that he was a test case for like Farouk's cousins who are being trained as recruiters. Everyone's still manipulating the truth to get what they want.
Yeah. And
like, that doesn't change.
Yeah, like reading Parvez's chapter, I was just like, oh, this is like the real tragedy. Like if it was just like, if his perspective was just not there and it was just everyone else's perspectives after he died, like I feel like it wouldn't have been as powerful and everyone's perspective wouldn't have been as strong. I kind of wish that Parvez's chapters were a little bit longer, because it does like jump from time to time of him like before recruitment, after recruitment, and then him trying to escape. I kind of wish there was more on when he was going through training, just to see like how horrible it was and how he was able to endure it. But yeah, like reading parts of this chapter, it was really heartbreaking. Like it was more heartbreaking than me reading like about like Anika going to Pakistan and just like grieving over his body and saying like, oh, like let me take my brother home. Like I felt more heartbroken reading Parvez's chapters because I was just like, oh, this is just a kid. And just like even like the anecdotes of them saying like, oh, we're gonna recruit like brides for like the people in our group. And I was just like, oh my God, these poor girls. And
well, let's talk about now the real bad guy of the story, which is the 24-hour media cycle.
Oh God,
and social media.
Felt triggered the entire time. I'm just like, oh, bad journalism. Just terrible. Just terrible.
I mean, a big chunk of Anika's section was literally a Twitter feed.
Twitter feed and just like tabloid articles, like
leads
and reporters calling her knickers as a nickname, slut shaming.
Yeah, I hear a lot about like British tabloid journalism and how terrible they are, especially when it comes to race, right? Like how, like, you know, you hear stories about how Meghan Markle is being bullied just because
she's mixed race.
Yeah,
she's black. Yeah.
Like, It's
England.
Yeah. And how that forces the hand of a lot of people, right? Because of those forces where if someone even comes out as like their neighbor, I forgot her name, but she defended Parvez.
Gladys.
Gladys. And then basically she got dragged on Twitter by like horrible netizens. Those forces that cause people like Isma and people like Karma to do what they do, right? Because they can't be seen as sympathizers, like sympathizing with a victim who is being portrayed as the enemy. And Parvez, being a Muslim person who has basically all these strikes against him, right? He did leave home to join ISIS. His father was a extremist, and his sister was having a relationship with the Home Secretary's son. It all just paints the Pashas as this like diabolical, manipulative terrorist family. And so there was no room for anyone to publicly sympathize with them and empathize with them. It's very sad.
Yeah. I do want to like share one quote, and this is when Anika had taken Parvez's body and put it in the park, and she's like saying, she's doing like a speech in front of the camera, and she says, "In the stories of wicked tyrants, men and women are punished with exile. Bodies are kept from their families, their heads impaled on spikes, their corpses thrown into unmarked graves. All these things happen according to the law, but not according to justice. I am here to ask for justice."
And that's pretty much like the book in a nutshell.
Yeah. I personally thought like the whole like repatriate Parvez's body in Pakistan and like and Karamat saying like, oh, he'll be with his family and like he'll be with his country. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Like he's British. He like grew up here and just because you're, you know.
It's like those stories of adoptees who are sent back to their home country, even though they've never been there. They don't have the language skills. They don't have any family left. And how is that justice, right?
Yeah.
I mean, in the end, I don't think anyone really got justice. You know?
I mean, what is justice?
Some people can say that Karma got what he deserved, but did his son and did Anika get what they deserved? You know, like in the end, it's a tragedy, so no one really gets what they deserve in terms of like a happy ending. But do they really get what they deserved from like a karmic perspective either? Right? Because you can say Karma got what he deserved for being such a dick, but is that true?
It's tragic because it's with young people. You know, 19 is such a young age, and it's like who hasn't made mistakes when they're 19 years old or like in their early 20s? And like, think about like, you know how like people on Twitter, leading up to 2020, they're like, oh, like a decade ago, starting like when I was like in 2010, like this is what I was doing with my life. And now in like 2019, 2020, this is where I am in life. Like, think about that. Like, you change so much within a decade. And you are possible to changing so much in that time period. And just to have like two 19-year-olds just die so tragically without like being able to be the people that they could have been or meant to have been. Yeah. Like, it's just like cut short. And I think that makes the book a lot more tragic.
Yeah.
I am really curious because we're Americans and we're reading a book that like takes place in England and has like English policies. I'm pretty sure we're missing a lot of like nuances. So for the people who are in our Goodreads group who are part of Britain, I would really like to hear your opinions. I know that there are some of you in like lurking about, so please share on our discussion thread.
Yeah. And I would say, even though this takes place in a country that we don't live in, Rira and myself, I thought the portrayal of the immigrant experience was pretty spot on. And I think this is something that diaspora writers, I guess, innately know how to do because it's our lived experience. But even like when Eamon was describing how his father would become a different person when he visited his relative's house and was able to speak Urdu freely and like be amongst his people, even though his mother like hated it.
Like, I feel like all diasporans have that side, you know? Like, when you're with, like, your parents and, like, your family and pretty much, like, the Asian community, you do act, like, a certain way. And then when you're with, like, you know, your friends, like, you'll act a different way. For me personally, like, my Korean is not that great. So, like, I guess, like, when I'm with, like, my cousins or whatever, or like family friends, I tend to be a lot meeker. And even the way I talk is like very different. Whereas like when I talk in English, I'm like much more forthcoming. And and like I feel like everyone has like their own mask when it comes to blending in with like your birth country people.
Yeah.
I don't know. That was not very articulate, but I think you guys know what I mean.
Yeah. I mean, this whole book was about people thinking they're doing either the right thing or the best thing for either themselves or their loved ones, and everything going bad because of it. And, you know, that's what tragedies are all about. The pride before the fall, right?
Then I guess all of our lives are tragedies, Marvin.
The world is tragedy.
I know.
Well, that'll do it for our discussion of Home Fire by Kamila Shamsie.
And for our first book of 2020, I actually let Marvin pick out the book. So, Marvin, what are we reading for January 2020?
This is a lot of pressure because I've never chosen a book before.
That's not true. That cannot be true.
I don't think I did. It's always been, hey, Rira, what are you reading?
I have like come up with like a list and then we did like pick together, but I guess I did like pre-select choices. So I guess I have always picked the books. Sorry.
Yeah. But to kick off 2020, we'll be reading The Three-Body Problem by Cixin Liu, translated by Ken Liu, who was the author of our past book club pick, The Grace of Kings. Yeah. And this is a book that I've been wanting to read for a while, but just haven't found the time or gumption to start on my own. So what better way than to use this book club to force me to read this book? And it's been out for a couple years now, and it's been lauded as a really great science fiction story, but also a great example of a science fiction that's from a more Chinese lens that is different than the way like Western writers approach science fiction, which has been the lens that we've been reading for our book club for the past couple years as well. So I'm really interested to kind of see what all the hubbub's about and to experience the book. And Ken Liu, the translator, has been given a lot of props for his translation of the text.
Yeah, it's been a while since we read a book that was translated.
Yeah.
Yeah, so...
I think the last one was Murakami, right?
Yeah, Murakami. That was way early in 2019.
Yeah.
So I hope that you join us for the discussion of Three-Body Problem. It is a semi-long book. I believe it is around 400 pages. But we will get through it.
We had a good break with this one. I think Home Fire was only what?
It was around 250 pages.
Yeah. Which is relatively short for our book club. So it's a nice change of. It was a nice. I won't say breezy, but it wasn't really breezy.
It was a nice
like
change of pace.
Yeah. Especially for the month filled with holidays, it was good to read something that. You can finish in a couple hours.
Yeah. And don't worry, when it's February, we will read something much shorter.
Well, Rira, I look forward to another great year of Books and Boba with you for 2020. We have a lot of great stuff coming in. Rira and I both have made resolutions to bring you even more content this coming year. We already have several author interviews lined up over the next few weeks. And we're definitely going to be bringing you more of those as the year goes on, as well as other cool stuff, hopefully.
Hopefully, yeah.
Well, Rira, Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
And we'll see you all next time on Books and Boba.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone. Thanks for listening to Books and Boba. This episode was hosted by Marvin Yue and Rira Yu and produced and edited by Marvin Yue. This podcast was recorded at the Potluck Podcast Studios located within the Visual Communications offices in downtown Los Angeles. You can learn more about Visual Communications and their programs such as the Los Angeles Asian Pacific Film Festival by going to their website at vcmedia.org. Thanks also to the Potluck Podcast Collective, a collective of Asian American hosted podcasts that Books and Boba is a proud member of. You can learn more about our fellow Potluck podcast by checking out the website podcastpotluck.com.
Hey, I'm Phil Yu, and you may know me from a blog called Angry Asian Man.
And I'm Jeff Yang, author, journalist, and celebrity dad.
We host a podcast called They Call Us Bruce, an unfiltered conversation about what's happening in Asian America.
Each week or so, we host a discussion about some of the most vital and interesting topics in our pop culture and our community, bringing in guests who are shaping and informing this thing called Asian America from Hollywood to D.C. and beyond.
We got media, entertainment, food, family, politics, representation.
The good, the bad, the WTF of it all.
So check us out wherever you get your podcasts or at theycallsbruce.com.
Peace.
Peace.